Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I'm so excited today because we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that is branding. Because I think it is so important, not for your company. It is very important for your company, but more for you as a professional to know what your brand is and to be very specific about it. So please join me in welcoming Emma Donovan to our program today. Welcome, Emma. How are you doing?
Thank you, Deb. It's such a pleasure to be here and really looking forward to our chat today. I am sitting in sunny Cape Town on the other side of the world. So yeah, looking forward to diving in.
I love it. Yeah, it's not sunny here in Atlanta. It's cold today. And I believe you are my first South African guest. So welcome to the program. Gotta love technology, right? It's just like you're here in the room with me.
No, it is incredible and very honored to be your first South African guest.
Perfect. I love it. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So Emma Donovan is a seasoned entrepreneur with more than 15 years of experience in brand strategy and professional profiling. As co-founder of Dapper, she creates innovative products to give leaders the confidence to own their story in an authentic way and show up as the best versions of themselves. Currently, her focus is on sustainable ways to approach personal brand development for entrepreneurs and leadership teams in a way that's authentic and creates space to build their brands with intention. Emma's superpower lies in injecting enthusiasm and vibrancy into any situation. So again, Emma, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that intro.
Perfect. I love it. And there were several words, and then I'm thinking, got to talk, several words in there that we'll be talking about. Well, I always like to ask my guests at the start to tell us a little bit about how they got to where they are today, because I think that's always a very interesting story. And for you, it might be part of your brand.
Yeah, I love that question. I think there's so many different avenues you could go down, but maybe I'll try keep it focused around brand and then how I figured out that I had a brand. I think one of the sort of penny drop moments for me was when I heard someone say, you have a brand, it's up to you whether you own that story. Like every one of us does have a brand. It's actually the one thing you'll have your whole life. And I was at a point in my career where I was, classic entrepreneur, getting caught up in all the different sort of shiny things coming my way and kind of at a crossroad and needing to decide what I did next. And I listened to a speaker talk about putting your own brand first, and then you can have all the different companies and things you do sort of underneath that. And it flipped it around for me in terms of my thinking, because I'd always put the business that I was part of at the time first in terms of brand positioning. And I thought, branding, we started Dapper about 3 years ago, but recently I looked back at my old LinkedIn articles and I did an article probably about 14 years ago around personal brand, long before I intentionally had that as part of my identity and kind of my career. So I think it's a lovely example of how you may take a winding road to get to where you are, but if you're passionate about something and interested in it, it will find a way to pop up and be part of your story later on. So my story started in Zimbabwe. I was born there and lived in England for some of my childhood, and then went to school in Zimbabwe and came down to Cape Town, South Africa for university and never really left. So it's definitely captured my heart as a place to call home.
I love it. And I love that you talk about the fact that, sometimes there's that something underneath that just keeps pulling us, right? And many times we ignore it. And because we've got people telling us, oh no, you should be doing this or you should be doing that. But the funny thing is, it, like you said, it's always there. And when you actually decide, hey, I'm going to embrace this, wonderful things happen.
Absolutely. I often say, if you feel like you're swimming upstream for too long, you maybe need to stop and think why. And there are times in life that are challenging, and there may be, you need to put in the hard work to get to where you want to go, but you also need to enjoy every chapter of your life, and you need to find things that bring you joy, little things. So that's something I really focus on, is how do I make each day something that I enjoy and I feel like I'm adding value. And it can be in a really small way, but just not swimming upstream too much of the time.
I love it. Yeah. And we do swim upstream on occasion. Sometimes it really is to deliberately get to where we're going.
Yeah.
But other times it becomes the habit, right? And we don't even realize that we're fighting that current all the time until we realize that we're tired. You and I are recording this on a Monday morning. How many is it Monday? It's Tuesday. See, I've lost a day. On a Monday morning, people wake up, or even worse, Sunday evening. I have to go to work tomorrow. And to me, a big part of that is because you're doing something that is against your personal brand. So tell us a little bit more. Let's define brand, and especially brand versus reputation.
That's a great question. So for me, reputation is how others see you.
Okay.
Whereas your personal brand is being intentional about how you show up. So it is still how others see you, but you can shape that narrative. And I think that's such a wonderful opportunity to lean into that authenticity that you mentioned with my intro, something I'm so passionate about, because I think personal brand is often considered something you have to curate and work really hard at. Whereas for me, it's leaning into who you already are. It's owning that space. It's telling your story. I think storytelling is such a powerful way to convey your brand. And it's often associated with a digital footprint and your LinkedIn profile. But for me, it's how you walk into a room. It's how you hold space in a meeting.
Right.
It is the consistency that you can build into your life with your family, your friends, your team, and how you show up as a leader. Those are all part of personal brand. So it's quite a holistic view on it, as opposed to, if you think of a company brand, it's often at a very basic level, your logo and your visual brand, and then it can be part of, your culture and how that's rolled out. But the synergy between all of them, I think, is where the magic happens.
Right. So do you see a lot of people whose reputation and brand are very different?
There are definitely examples of that, and we work with clients to try and align them better. I think a great example is, most of our clients have some level of imposter syndrome, and that can show up as shyness. It could come across, someone who's shy may come across as arrogant. So they may just be nervous to have a conversation that comes across as cold or distant. So if they can understand, how to be more comfortable in that situation, they may come across as more approachable, and that will shift how they are seen. So if you can smile, be warm, interact with someone, your reputation over time can shift.
Right.
Just by having that awareness. And I think self-awareness is a huge part of brand as well.
It's a huge part of that. And I think so many people either don't realize, or many people don't care. I mean, they're like, whatever. And that's fine. But we also have to realize, especially from a professional standpoint, if we're not, paying attention to it, it can cause issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's about, whether you care or not. And I think that's such a good point, because I don't believe you should try and please everyone or have everyone like you. I think you should be comfortable in your skin and true to your values, and then you will attract like-minded people and people who appreciate what you have to say. So it's definitely a topic that people love to debate, because there's lots of different views on that. But for me, it's about, if you are being authentic and true to yourself, it's okay if not everyone likes that, as long as you are comfortable with the way you show up and behave.
Right. It's kind of like you have to know what your why is. And And it's so interesting because we do see people who are not authentic. And, and maybe it's, you mentioned a shy person. So maybe it's the shy person who's trying really, really hard. And, they're just so uncomfortable that you want to take them off to the side. It's okay. Breathe. It's all right. Or as you said, they come across as being boisterous, and they really want to make sure that their shyness is not coming across. And then other people who they do the opposite. They kind of become that introvert because they're afraid of getting their opinions out there. Maybe what's happened is they've had their opinions and their views stomped on, or things, so they're just not going to tell that anymore. And so that's again where it's important to be authentic to yourself. I mean, if you're having to hide what you are, then you're not with the right people.
I completely agree. And I love that you mentioned your why. We often, it's such a daunting question, but another way to frame it is what really matters to you and what is enough. Right. And the combination of those two is really powerful for me, because most of us can list what matters. And it's not going to be the same for two people, but just starting with that list is such a lovely way to understand your brand foundation. So we often talk of the essence of your brand, and that is what matters, what your values are, how you want to show up. Another great question is, what do you want people to say when you're not in the room?
Right.
And that's, how are you perceived, but, in a way that is just true to who you want to be.
Right. And it's okay for people's why to be, I want to be a millionaire, a billionaire, and, because then along with that might be, and then I will be very, very philanthropic. Maybe not. I mean, for some people, it really is. And part of that might be how they were raised, all sorts of things. But it's, it's really not a bad thing to say, I want to be more than comfortable or whatever it is. But again, you have to, think about what it is that maybe go along with getting there. Are you going to be a person of great character, or are you going to cheat and cut corners?
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking through that and talking through it, I find really helpful. It's often something people mull over on their own, and it's a great place to start, and journaling about it, but actually having a conversation with people you trust. And we get all of our clients to ask 5 people in their lives for qualities they admire, as well as what are their blind spots or areas for improvement. Because I don't know if you've heard of the Johari window model, but it's a really interesting model where you have different quadrants of sort of how your self-awareness, and one of them is your blind spots, and we all have them. Right. And if you can be open to getting that constructive feedback from people that you love and trust, it's something you can work on all the time. So I had, when I first did the exercise, I asked my first boss, she was one of the people who still very close to, and I asked her for feedback, and she said, you have very high standards for yourself and of others, and you sometimes need to realize that the standards you set for yourself are not realistic for those around you. And it really was powerful to hear, because I could immediately think of a few examples where I maybe was a little bit too hard on people because I saw their potential, or we had a deadline to meet. But I've learned to just soften that slightly, and sort of, we talk about balancing power and grace, and how you want to be a powerful, strong leader, but you also need that grace and that like gentle side of you to come through, and the two together just work so much better. So it was an example where I learned a lot just from one line of feedback from someone that I trusted.
I love it. Do you find that there's very definitely masculine and feminine traits? And I'm doing that as the not as the saying male and female, because I think we have both. But how do we combine those, and especially in our brand?
Yeah, I love that question. So I think what I just mentioned speaks to that. So for me, the power is a more masculine energy. The grace is a more feminine energy. The yin and yang, they really work well together. I did a yoga class this morning where we had to sort of cup our hands like this. And the yoga teacher said, notice which hand you naturally put on top, and your left side.
And now I'm starting thinking about that,
now
right?
you've got to do it. And your left side is your feminine energy. And she said, if you have got your left hand on top, your masculine energy is like holding or supporting it.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
The bottom hand is supportive. So if your left hand's on the bottom, that's a supportive one. And you could see everyone sort of going, oh, which side of me is needing the support at the moment? And I think we all have both energies and need to tap into them to be the best versions of ourselves.
Right.
I think in business, there's definitely an inclination to tap into the more masculine energy. And I found I did that maybe a little bit too much in my earlier career. Whereas now I'm embracing the feminine, softer side, knowing that I've already built up the resilience in the masculine side of the energy and brain.
Yeah, I think as women, the power and the masculine, whether it comes naturally or not, it's our fear is many times that we're going to be thought of as that B word, right? And so then we back off and people take advantage, or we lose the opportunity, or all of those things. And so it is tricky to figure out how to be powerful in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's different for each person. But I think there are so many wonderful examples. We've just finished reading Michelle Obama's book, The Light We Carry. And I think it's a lovely example where she has done that in such challenging roles where she's been, put into completely situations she's never experienced before, and always managed to, from what I've read and seen, maintain that balance. So I think it is also useful to have examples like that, where you can draw inspiration and carve your own path, but with the kind of inspiration from people who've done it in a more public eye.
And you mentioned a word that I think is very important, especially for women, and that's grace. We can be powerful and have grace. And I think one of the examples that I always think of is, Queen Elizabeth. I mean, I just, I'm American, I'm as American, but I'm one of those royal watchers. And to me, it was devastating when she passed, because I thought she was one of the most perfect examples of a woman in power who, she definitely had that British stiff upper lip, right? But you also knew that there was that grace that was there. And so she was, to me, she was a great example of a woman leader who was able to truly excel in that role. And I mean, clearly, she had grown into it from being, a very young girl, but it was a good example. And when we see those powerful women, I think it is good to look at why, what is it about them that it has made them such good leaders, and also men. I mean, because when we really look at men who we see as being good leaders, I think a lot of times we want them to obviously have, in many cases, some of those feminine traits, the caring for others, all of those various things.
Yeah, I think vulnerability is another big one. It's something I am so drawn to. And I think even more so in men, just because it's maybe less expected.
Right.
But people who are able to have a very honest, vulnerable conversation, especially in a leadership position, I think is so powerful. So it's another lovely example, along with grace, of a quality that taps into that feminine energy and creates space. It creates space for your brand to be authentic and for people to resonate with it. I think if you are too powerful and strong the whole time, it doesn't seem real.
Right.
Like, you've got to have bad days. You've got to have moments where you stumble or, second guess yourself. That is completely part of life and part of having a real brand.
Right. And when you show that vulnerability, it makes you human, I think is what it is. Back to the Queen, the one tear at Prince Philip's funeral, that was, if she, I mean, it would have been totally understandable if she had been just crying her eyes out. I mean, he was her partner in so many ways, but that one tear was what just was crushing for many people.
Yeah.
But then we see the opposite too, where we see a leader bend down and talk to a small child, or, do all of those things. And, I think during COVID, we saw a lot of that, where leaders kind of had to shift because they weren't in the room, with people. So they had to learn how to deal with them differently.
Absolutely. And going back to your point about children, I think they're such a wonderful example of, well, two things: the authenticity, because they haven't learned to put up a mask, but also just those moments of joy that I spoke about, is they just delight in such simple little things. I think children, and we spoke just before we started about cats and dogs, and I just think, again, like pets and children can remind us to not overthink, not take things too seriously, just be in the moment and just, enjoy it.
Right. Yeah, think about a child chasing a butterfly. There's
Absolutely.
nothing more joyous than something like that. And the trick is, though, how do we bring that into ourselves in a way that, again, is authentic? Because I think especially in business, we don't want to seem soft. So how do we have that as part of our brand? And again, have it be authentic.
I think a lot of it is to do with boundaries. One of my favorite stories came from a business coach early in my career who said, you never want to have spaghetti boundaries. And I love that, the idea of cooked spaghetti kind of falling all over your plate. And I think it's much harder to respect someone who is not consistent with boundaries. So to have very firm but fair boundaries in life, but I think especially in business, is a great way to remain authentic and to have that consistency in terms of where you draw the line, what your brand stands for, and how you show up.
Right. Now, I saw something on your website that really made me think, and I love your website. It's becomedapper.com. And great, obviously great visuals. I mean, you have such a way with that, wonder, and I want to talk about those later, but you mentioned the fact that, and we've said it at the start, everyone needs a brand, but I think so many people think, I am an employee, I don't need a brand. Why is it important for everybody? And I'm also going to include, maybe you're not working. I think every person does have a brand. So why is it important to figure out what that is if you're not the CEO of the company?
Great question. I think I'll share two examples, if that's all right, of recent interactions I've had with clients. So one is where we've worked with the kind of middle leadership team in a company. And I always encourage people to challenge what we're saying and debate it. And so we had a few people say, well, why do I need a brand? And one of the main points that came up was that you need a brand for your internal team as well as externally. So you may not be in a position in the company yet or ever that is client facing, but you've got a team that look up to you, or you're part of a team where your peers can look up to you. It doesn't need to be a, senior, junior sort of dynamic. So how you show up for them is really important, and being confident with what your brand stands for and whether it aligns to the company. We do a lot of work around brand synergy. So how, as an individual, your brand aligns to the company, and you don't need the exact same values to align, but you need to have some sense of where they do align. And another example is someone who's recently enrolled in our online course, who is a mum. She was a nurse, and she left nursing when she wanted to start a family and worked in a more sort of HR sort of role, which she quite enjoyed. But after her maternity leave, she said, I really need to find what next in my career. She's never been in a leadership position. She's worked in trauma. So she's got really interesting experience that's, I'm sure, applicable to so many industries. But she needed to actually go back and go, I'm not just a nurse. I'm not just a mom. Not just a wife. I need to figure out who I am. And by going through our kind of 3-month brand yourself course, we just have had a few lovely messages from her along the way saying she's got so much clarity around her purpose and what she wants to do. And I spoke to her last week, and she was very excited to say she wants to do first aid at events. So it's taking the sort of nursing experience into an environment where she can work limited time to be available for her family. She gets to interact with people, and having a brand and clarity on it is going to help her land that job, because she needs to put herself forward in a way that is relatable, that she's got the right experience, which she has all of those things. But how she puts it forward is really going to, be a sort of game changer in terms of landing that dream job for the next stage of her career.
Right.
So again, a very different example where it's not a corporate job. It's working through a kind of career change or life change, different life stage.
Well, and we do change as we get older. You mentioned that, she had kids, and, and so that's probably one of the big things. And then when your kids leave, then you're always mom, you're always dad. But you're no longer, that primary caregiver. They've gone off, and hopefully they're, off being independent. But then what? And I think especially for moms who were the stay-at-home moms, depending on how long they stayed at home, they may absolutely have no idea of what. And so how do you work with folks like that?
So we
and I want to make sure, being a stay-at-home mom is absolutely fabulous. We don't ever want to, and you're getting a lot of job skills during that time too. But yeah, I and maybe that's it. I think a lot of women think, ugh, I don't have any skills anymore. And, so how do you help women and men who, stayed home to raise their kids?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think a lot of it is around building confidence again.
Okay.
So confidence in the skills you have. And I love that you said you have so many skills from running a home or running a family that are applicable. And it's also realizing that there's, as much as the world's changing and there's AI and there's tech and all of these changes, there's still so much space for creativity, for experience. One of my business ideas, which I haven't quite got to yet, is to pair very experienced people who have retired or haven't worked for a while, but have experience in an industry with young professionals who are just desperate for that experience, sort of a mentor kind of way to pair people up. So I think that's something that doesn't matter how long you've been out of an industry, you've got relevant experience to share, and then not be scared to take a step back in your career. So you may have left in quite a senior position, when you decided to stay home, or for whatever reason you had a break in your career. It's okay to take a step back or to be in a different environment. So I think to not put too much pressure on yourself well, maybe it's to redefine what success looks like. That's another way to frame it, and to just go in with, reframing it with the right confidence, knowing how you add value. I think that's a huge part of it.
It is. And then we have the opposite that happens where someone is in, say, a industry or even a company for many, many years, and that becomes their identity. And then something changes, whether by their choice or not by their choice. So how do you help them kind of rediscover themselves?
We've had quite a few clients in that exact situation where their identity is so tied up in the company they're part of. You often see it as well with founders who exit a business, that they feel quite lost afterwards, and they've often, done really well financially to be able to sell or whatever they've done, but they're just kind of floundering. And we often say you actually need time. You need to give yourself time to process. Journaling is a huge part of that. We work with a lot of business and life coaches. So to really unpack, what are you processing, and how are you going to, again, reframe that and use it for the next step. I feel that there's such lessons that are so transferable and skills. So it's looking at really figuring out, drilling down into what does bring you joy, where do you add value, what do you want to be doing. I think people so often look at what they should be doing rather than what do they want to be doing. And if they're in a position to actually pause and look at that differently, then I think that's an incredible opportunity, a daunting one, but one that just has so much potential. We had a client who was a very successful lawyer, and in the sort of latter part of his career, he wanted to be a sports journalist. And it was such a complete shift. And he said, I want to do that in 5 years' time. So what do I need to do now? Which was incredible to sort of think ahead. And we said, well, let's start. Why don't you start a blog? And why don't you look at podcasting? And why don't you just build up very gradually a library of content that supports your next career stage before you get there. So that's another way to do it, is you can start early. You can do something as a side hustle or a hobby and just build up experience in something that you want to explore.
Right. I work with folks on their LinkedIn profiles and specifically senior level folks who have lost their brand. Their brand is their company. And of course, to me, LinkedIn is a perfect place for you to get your personal brand back out there. But yeah, they really don't know. And it's okay. I mean, if you have a great company, for that to be very much a part of who you are. Yeah. But your company may or may not be philanthropic, or and you are, but there's also other things in there that I think so many people forget about. So talk to us more about what is a brand. I mean, can it be that I like to garden, or I'm extremely detail oriented? What are all the things that go into a brand?
Yeah. So I love that you touched on LinkedIn and how you position yourself, because one of the things we work on with clients is to figure out what we call their content pillars are. And those are themes that they can use as the kind of starting points for their thought leadership content. And we encourage them to have one that is not career focused, or at least one of the 5. So you mentioned gardening. It could be a hobby, it could be a passion, it could be travel, food, whatever it is. And it's, how do you find synergy or parallels between that and your career? Because again, going back to the idea that storytelling is such a powerful way to share your brand and put your brand out there, is if you can find ways to resonate with your audience rather than just sharing business tips or facts or selling what you do, I think it's a lot. Yeah, it makes it more fun on both sides. So that would definitely be one of the things. And something else that popped into my mind with that question was around personality profiling. So I think the risk with it is it can, people can take it too literally and put themselves or other people in a box. So Enneagram is one we use a lot, and people will say, oh, well, I'm an Enneagram 7, so I'm very visionary, I'm not good at detail. And they immediately kind of brush something off.
And they tell themselves, I'm not good at detail. So then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely. But I do think there's value in doing different profiles, and it's just such a lovely way to learn about yourself. So Enneagram, insights, discovery, wealth dynamics, Clifton strengths, they're all ones that we really enjoy reading clients' results, chatting through them. I feel like you learn something about yourself with each one. I loved how you mentioned to me you learn something from every podcast guest, and it's a similar thing of different perspectives, different ways of seeing the world. You can just really draw on that. So I feel it's quite a solid foundation for understanding your brand and how you show up, and to just kind of have different avenues that you explore to find out more about yourself. I feel like you never stop learning about yourself, and also your brand evolves with you. So we've often had clients who say, right, I want to get my brand looking good and tick that off the list. And we say, oh, no, you absolutely can do that foundational phase, which you know a lot about in terms of your LinkedIn and getting that, really up to date. But it's how you tell the story, it's how it evolves and how it changes as you grow and change.
Right. And then I think, along there, one of the things that people think is that they can put things in a box. I have my professional and I have my personal. And we see that a lot on social media, right? Where they've got this outstanding LinkedIn profile. And then you look at, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever else. And it's like you're looking at 2 different people. And to me, that's always confusing. Because I'm like, okay, which one are you? And it's really confusing if they're, very different. I mean, clearly I'm posting differently on Facebook than I'm going to post on LinkedIn, but it still is part of that whole person. And, I was working with a young woman one time, and she was getting ready to graduate from college. Outstanding young woman. I mean, she had and she had volunteered, she had all of these things, and so her LinkedIn profile was really good, and she had been connecting with people all along. It wasn't one of these things where she was going to graduate with, 2 connections. She had, huge number of people. And so she really knew what to do on LinkedIn. And then I went to her Twitter, now known as X, right? That's never going to work, right? Talk about a branding thing. Oh my gosh. But, she was a totally different person on Twitter. And the problem was her Twitter name was her name. So it was very easy to find her. And, I went to her Twitter profile, and aside from anything else, she was extremely foul. She used very bad language on it. Which, a lot of 20 somethings do. That was, but I told her, I said, okay, no. And she said, but that's where my friends are. And I said, okay, you need 2 Twitter profiles, then have one for your friends that is harder for people to find, and the one that is tied to your name, which a current or potential employer could find. You got to clean that up. You just and I think she didn't understand that we're really not in silos. You don't have your professional and your personal. So how do you talk more to people about that?
So what I ask them to do is take out their phones, and I've done this in a keynote talk, and I get very strange looks. They're like, surely not. And I say, please take out your phone and type your full name into Google. And watching their faces change is just one of my favorite moments, because it's just not something we think to do. And that first page of results is exactly what a potential employer is going to see. And what you ideally want to do is own that first page, which you're not going to do if you have a celebrity who has the same name, or there are examples
that might not be a bad thing. But
not always a bad thing, but it's about your social media profiles, hopefully LinkedIn at the top, whether you have an about section on your company site, or if you're featured on a company page. But then what other links are there? If there are articles you've written, podcasts you've been part of, societies or associations you're part of, that gives a really rich full picture of who you are. And I completely agree. I think it's really important to have a consistent brand across all of them. And you can have, for example, on Instagram, a private profile for your personal one, which I do just because I've got a lot of friends, kids, and things on there, which are
especially with
more,
kids. You have to be protective.
Be a bit more protective. But I think if it's a platform where you don't have a private profile, you really do need to think about what you're putting out there, and also question why your brand is inconsistent. So it's one thing to say, well, that's where my friends are. But I think especially as you get older, I believe you should strive to have a more consistent brand in terms of how you show up. So not necessarily needing to have the 2 different ones. I'm sure there are examples where you would. But I think if possible, to just be, again, comfortable in your skin, to show up in a more consistent way. I think that's first prize for me.
Well, and I love that you say Google yourself, because that's whether it's, you're applying for a job, or, you are a business owner, because we do it, right? Where, we go to a meeting, or we're getting ready to meet with someone for the first time, and we Google them. We don't just go to their LinkedIn profile. And I remember one time I had this gentleman I was working with, and he was in the job market, and his cover letter, I don't even know if they still do cover letters, but anyhow, his cover letter said, when you Google me, this was just the funniest thing in the world. When you Google me, which I know you will, please know I am not the mass murderer. So he had a name that was the same as a mass murderer. And so he knew he was not coming up on the first page of Google, maybe even the second or the third, or all of those. But I love the fact that he addressed it, and he addressed it in a funny way. And so, it was just, what are people going to find when they look for you? And what are the images? That's the other thing is, when you put somebody's name in there, what pictures are going to come up, and are they, and I'm not saying we have to be the suit and tie and professional all the time. But, are they your maybe a little risque vacation pictures or things like that? Now, they're there. And if you didn't post them, they're there. You can't do anything. But again, you just have to know what's out there.
Yeah. It reminded me of when I was interviewing a young woman for a role. I looked at her profile just before she walked in. I had a busy day and I just did a quick search, and her profile picture was her drinking out of a champagne bottle.
Oh, goody.
Which, not damaging, but I was like, interesting choice, but just before a job interview. And she walked in and she was so well put together and well spoken, but I
couldn't get that image out of your head
because I couldn't get that image out of my head. And I brought it up with her. I mean, she was lovely and we offered her the job, but I did speak to her about it afterwards. I said,
honey, you need to change your picture.
Yeah. And think about changing it. It's your choice. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but this was my impression. This is why I think, again, like you said, it doesn't have to be suit and tie, but what is natural for you? What's something you align with that's still professional? So we had a good laugh about that. But in some situations, maybe it might have influenced the person, you know what I mean, interviewing her in a negative way. So worth thinking about.
Well, and you are, I love how much you use images on your website. I mentioned that briefly. But I also wanted, so I go to your website and I go to the about section expecting headshot bio, right? Which is what everybody has. You don't. And I love it because what you have are images that represent what's important to your staff. And nothing about, went to school here and yada, yada, yada. It was just these beautiful, glorious images. But that's very different than, like I said, than what we normally see. So tell me a little bit more about that, because obviously it intrigued me.
Yeah. I'm really glad you commented on it and noticed it. So my business partner, Lindsay, and one of our stars and our team, Chloe, are both photographers. And so we have a lot of fun doing our own shoots and trying to practice what we preach. And I really didn't enjoy being on camera before I met them. I just never felt relaxed. And I was like, I'd rather be behind the lens. And they have taught me to relax and lean into it. And they do that really well for clients. So part of our offering is photography for clients.
I know. I was like, oh, you're too far away.
And with clients that are not, we have clients all over the world. We help them get more comfortable in front of the camera, give them tips to take photos, the lighting, all of that sort of thing. But there is just a joy and fun that comes through in those photos. And I think you've mentioned that kind of human lens. That's such a big part of our approach. So we don't want stock photos. We got a very creative team, so we could have had more abstract or designed images, but we went, you know what, we want to have real people that work with us, so that, again, that consistency, what you see on the website, they're not airbrushed, they're not over edited, they are warm and natural, and that's a huge part of our brand. So it was quite an intentional choice, but also just felt like a natural way to share our story.
Well, and I look at it, and I'm looking at it right now, and it does, when I look at it, I think, and you call them lifestyle pictures, which they are, but I look at it and I think, oh, I want to know who the person is that has the picture of the fish or the old truck, how, and so to me, it was intriguing, because I thought, wow, those are just such pretty, and to know that it is not stock photography. These are images that mean something to your staff. And I love, that you say have fun. I just had to do some new headshots. It was really funny. I needed a serious picture. I went through all the headshots that I had with the photographer I used from several years ago. Not a single picture in there where I'm not laughing, smiling, things like that, which that's a good thing, right? But I needed a picture where I was serious. And so I called her and I said, okay, we need to do a new quick photo shoot. Here's what I'm looking for, because I haven't changed my hair. So that was kind of nice. I can still use all of these headshots. And we took those. That was great. Got exactly what I wanted. But then there was this bronze metal giant frog that was sitting on a bench. Of course, I had to go take pictures with the frog, and those were, and then the other pictures that I just had to get from her were, big supporter of University of Colorado here in the States. And, because I knew I was going to be changing clothes, but I had to get makeup first. I just had a CU t-shirt on. And so she took some shots with that. And it was a nice t-shirt. Not ratty or anything like that. And so I bought one of those because that is me also. So, and I also went with pictures in denim jacket, not now that, we did do pictures in, a little bit more professional attire, but people who know me know that I'm going to be the one in the denim jacket and, just much more relaxed. Obviously, if I, when the need calls for me to wear a suit, I wear a suit. But it is, that whole authenticity that you talk about, that's an authenticity thing. It's not a thing, right? It is very core. And when it comes through in the images, I love that.
Yeah, it is. And just having photos you love of yourself on file is so important. So when you ask to send one through, you don't look through your camera roll going, oh, they're none of me on my own and they're none of me. I think it's just, it's something we really recommend is having a short bio about yourself in the first person and the third person, photos, just that like sort of almost like a media kit. Right. And again, you don't have to be someone who's always in the limelight to have that ready. There's lots of opportunities in life where you can just put that forward, have something that you feel comfortable with.
Right. And it's funny because I think, especially on LinkedIn, we all think, oh, it has to be this very professional picture. And I was talking with this young man one time and know him well. He's a friend. And I told him, and at that point in time, he was selling security, home security systems. So he normally wore a polo shirt with the logo on it, right? And that was how he dressed for work. His LinkedIn photo was not that. And I looked at it and I said, you need to switch that out. And he said, why? I said, because first of all, this is your wedding picture. I said, I know you love it, but you shouldn't have your wedding picture. And he said, how do you know it's my wedding picture? I mean, he was just curious. And I said, because no man wears white silk ties. And he went, oh, but that is part of that authenticity. I mean, if you are not going to wear a suit and tie, or for women, a business suit, all sorts of things, then don't have it as your professional pictures. It's perfectly okay to not do that.
I agree. And I think to wear something that shows your character or your taste is lovely, whether it's a color or a print or how you wear your hair, just to be natural.
Right. I love it. Well, you've got a great product on your website called Build Your Own Brand. And I think that's one of the things, hopefully now we've convinced people. You probably need to look at your brand. Even if you think you've got a great brand, make sure that it's right. But for those who are going to, so walk us through kind of how this works.
So I'm really excited about this product because we initially did a lot of one-on-one work with clients, which is great, but it's not scalable. And so by having an online course, we can just help so many more people. And we've made it into a 3-month format where you do it at your own pace. So there are 3 parts. We see it as a narrative of a story. So 3 parts with 3 chapters in each one. And it really is a journey to build your own brand, to build your confidence, get clarity, but also really practical tips. So we have wardrobe tips and photography tips. We have some of the personality assessments that I mentioned. We look at your LinkedIn, crafting your bio, your content pillars. So a lot of what we've touched on today, we cover. And we created a fictional character called Sophie, who does the course with you. And we've had such lovely feedback on that, because sometimes you just want an example. You want to see what someone else's mood board looks like, or how do they describe their values. And so Sophie does all the exercises and you can look at them along the way. And she kind of just becomes part of the journey. And we have a lot of video tutorials, worksheets, examples. So it really is as collaborative as an online course can be. And I think the fact that you do it in your own time is great, because you've got access to the course. We recommend 3 months, but if you have a sabbatical or a holiday and want to do a crash course in a month, you absolutely can. And if you are fitting it into, a crazy busy life at the moment, then you can space it out a bit more.
I love it. So when you work with people, we've been talking, obviously a lot about, really thinking things through. How many times do you find somebody that is just blown away? I mean, you mentioned the one statement that was made. How many times do you find people go, Wow.
Really, surprisingly often. I think for me, we sometimes just need to make small tweaks to someone's brand, but to them, it's everything. It's having the confidence to do their first keynote, or to make a career change, or to show up in a way that feels authentic. So I've learned that small changes can have a really big impact on someone's life and how they show up. So that is really rewarding. And also that no two brands are the same, which makes sense because we are all unique and we have our own stories. So you could give me two people with the same CV, the same taste and preferences even, but they still will have such a unique story to share. And I just feel everyone has value that they can share and add to their community. So a big part of it is that ripple effect of build your brand, influence those around you, and have a positive impact in whatever that looks like to you, whether that's your community where you live or your team at work or broader. But there's just such an opportunity for growth and to inspire others through this process.
Right. I love that you mentioned that that it is more, how many people, oh, I wish I could volunteer, or I want to volunteer, or, all those risks, but they never do. And, I definitely have the philosophy of, don't wait, because you never know what could happen. And so it is, if you want to volunteer now, we're not saying quit your job and go be a full-time volunteer, but maybe it's, a great example might be someone like a physician. You mentioned the nurse before, but a physician who says, I'm going to go do a month across, the programs, the Physicians with No Borders, and I don't have the name right, I apologize, but
Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah, that's it. And things like that, where they do, something to kind of fulfill their soul, and then they go back to do that other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think it's giving people the confidence or the motivation to go and do those things. To just, you live once, like you said, you don't know how long you've got, make the most of it, and lean in and just take that first step. Right. It's often a micro step that you need to take rather than a big change. But I think clarity on where you're going helps so much. So having a North Star to work towards, and then taking small steps to get there.
Right. And remember, as you've said, it is your story. It's not what your parents told you. It's not what your partner, your spouse, even your kids, your coworker, anybody, it's your story. And, and it's okay to take it and to own it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, oh my gosh, Emma, we've got a little over 5 minutes left. And so, do you have anything else that you want to make sure we cover before we get to the actual end of the program?
Good question. I think we've covered so much. I think I'm just really grateful to have had the space to unpack it with you, and knowing a little bit of your story and how you've built your brand. And I think it's lovely to have a conversation with someone who understands it, but also still has questions. I think it just really shows that it's a topic you can look at and unpack from so many different ways. And you can have just a little foot in the door, or you can be really knowledgeable and still building your brand. So I think it's just lovely to reflect on that. And wherever you are in your career, it's a good time to start.
I love it. Well, tell us more about Dapper. How do they find you, and what are the services that you provide?
So becomedapper.com, and you can also find us on LinkedIn and Instagram. Our main service is the Build Your Own Brand course, which is called Brand Yourself. And that is available through the website. And then for clients that want a more collaborative, in-depth process, we have the Dapper 9. And that means going the whole 9 yards with us. It is a 6-month process with a lot of coaching and one-on-one time with our team. So that's, another option. And then we do workshops. So those are often usually done over Zoom, and that is the synergy between leadership teams. It's building confidence. It's sometimes just what is brand, why is it important, getting your team to understand it. So lots of different options of either 3-hour, half day or full day workshops that we can do. And we love to tailor those for each client. So to give them, make it again, collaborative process. What do you want to get out of this? How can we add the most value for your team? And then for clients based in Cape Town, there's also the photography and videography element.
Oh, such beautiful work.
And yeah, I'd say those are kind of the main services we do. Once we've taken clients through a process, the 3 or 6 month process, we can support them on an ongoing basis. We really encourage them to create their own content and tell their own story, but we can help them do that. So whether it's, creative direction or strategic input to just continually refine it and evolve it with them, then we do that for some of our key clients too.
I love that. And you actually address that in your LinkedIn profile. You say, you write bios for other people, but it's hard to write it for yourself. And that's so true. We can do whatever it is for somebody else, but then when it comes to ourselves, we're like,
so much harder. It is so true.
I love it. I love it. Well, how would people find you?
So LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. My LinkedIn name is Emma Donovan -Dapper. And always love connecting with new people. So if you're listening and want to find out more or just chat, please do reach out.
Perfect. I love it. Well, Emma, this really has been so much fun. And like I said at the start, I love talking branding because I think it's so important for everybody. And to always be thinking about it. If you're 6 years old, if you're 60 years old, what is your brand? And is it what you want it to be? I think that is so important. But do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
So I think one of my favorite lines, which we've maybe said a few times, but just to kind of wrap it up, is your story is already out there and now is the perfect time to own it.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. Well, I've been having so much fun talking with Emma Donovan all the way from South Africa. I am Deb Creer, and until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.